Everyone, both in person and out there virtually. My name is Mallory Howard. I'm the assistant curator here at the Mark Twain House. So welcome to our Trouble Begins with Michaela Plouffe on the rise and fall of the Ampersand Hotel. We are so excited to host you for this hybrid event, so thank you for coming to our in-person audience and our virtual one. As a reminder, a replay of the event will be made available on the Trouble Begins playlist on our YouTube channel, accessible through our website. And at the end of the program, we will take a few minutes to answer some questions from the audience. So think about some questions you want to ask, and then at the end, we'll have time for that. Before we get started tonight, I'd like to thank our sponsors for the 2023 Trouble Begins season, the Center for Mark Twain Studies in Elmira, New York, and Connecticut Humanities, a nonprofit affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities, which supports cultural and historic organizations that tell the state's stories, build community, and enrich lives. So let me introduce our guest for tonight. Michaela Plouffe studied history at Plattsburgh State University. Here she studied the Hotel Ampersand, writing a short piece of historical fiction on the clash of classes within the Adirondack Park. She grew up on the old grounds of the hotel, exploring the woods and constantly finding relics of the past. I know because she also made me trek through the woods, which I was not happy about, but it ended up being very exciting. Her mother and her family grew up with the grounds as a camp, and over the past decade, Michaela and her family have been discovering bits and pieces of the history of the magnificent hotel. So with that, please give me a round of applause in welcoming Michaela.
Hello, everybody here and online. My name is Michaela Plouffe, and I did go to SUNY Plattsburgh. I studied history and anthropology with a focus in archaeology, so I loved to go outside and find things and map out where we found them. And this is one of my favorite things to talk about, so buckle up. I'm going to start. Recently, historic Saranac Lake suffered a tragic loss of one of our volunteers. So this presentation is in memory of Mary Hotelling, who put in 40 plus years of research and organization with historic Saranac Lake. So Mary, this one is for you. Now on a lighter note, we're gonna talk about blood spilt at the Bloods Motel. So this is a story that actually happened, but I found it in the Adirondack Daily Enterprise from January 27th, 1972. It was written by Bill McLaughlin, who is a local man. In 1888, a man named Charles Brown was hanging out at the then Riverside Inn, but originally the Bloods Motel, in downtown Saranac Lake, one of the other grand resort hotels in the area. And he was referenced as a good guide, but a real Jekyll and Hyde when it came to alcohol. So one day he was drinking too much at the hotel bar, and the bartender, George Berkeley, cut him off and sent him home. On his way out the door, Charles pretty much told George that he was going to shoot him. But when you're dealing with drunk people, just let it roll off your back. Unfortunately for George, Charles went home, grabbed a gun, and sat at the corner of where the hotel sat, and waited for George to come out to get a little bit of fresh air. And there he shot him dead. Then he grabbed his gun, he ran the 2 miles back to Lower Saranac, to the grounds of where the Hotel Ampersand was being built, and he fell asleep. He woke up in the morning to the carpenter of the Hotel Ampersand asking him, "Are you okay?" His only response was, "What of George Berkeley? How's he doing?" And the carpenter replied, "He died in the night." And Charles said, very mysteriously, "Well, then that means they're after me." Disappeared into the woods, never to be seen or heard from again. There are lots of stories about where he ended up. Most of them end up in Argentina, which is interestingly random. But I like to start with that story just because it really is the beginning of the Hotel Ampersand. He was in the ruins and he hung out there. And growing up in the woods, it can be easy to get lost out there. So this is some important information just to keep in the back of your mind. During this presentation, the Hotel Ampersand stood from 1888 to 1907, and like many of the well, like many buildings in the Adirondacks during this time, it burnt down. We'll get to that. And then there was the Ampersand and Cottages, or the Summer Colony Center, from 1908 to the 1960s on the same grounds. Major things going on in the area include Robert Louis Stevenson was staying in Saranac Lake, sort of on the other side of town from the Ampersand, but he was there because he did have tuberculosis. And then the Adirondack Park was created in 1892. In the 1890s, Edward Livingston Trudeau started his laboratory to study tuberculosis. Trudeau Labs is still up and running today and studying infectious disease. And there will be a presentation on Edward Livingston Trudeau here and online in November, done by Historic Saranac Lake. And then in 1901, of course, the reason I'm here, Mark Twain did visit Saranac Lake. And then in 1915, Dr. Edward Livingston Trudeau did pass. So, we owe a lot of what we know to our storytellers, our postcard writers, our journalers, receipt hoarders, and our photographers. So there's a lot of photographers of the Adirondacks, and I'm going to talk about two of them during this presentation. The first being one of the most famous, and that's Seneca Ray Stoddard. And if you've never heard that name before, I urge you to go to the Adirondack Experience or to the Chapman Museum in Glens Falls, New York, if you ever get the chance to see some of his works. I have a few photos from him here. He was born in 1843 in Saratoga, New York, and if you actually look him up on the Saranac Lake Historic Wiki, a picture of the Hotel Ampersand is the first photo you will see, which is very exciting. So he's considered one of the best photographers of his time, and I really do believe he was able to capture the majesty of the resort hotels on Lower Saranac. There were 3 of them in the vicinity. I like to call it the boot of Lower Saranac. It's kind of a little bay that is shaped like a boot. And this being, of course, the Hotel Ampersand here. And then I'm going to show you. This is the grounds of Martin's, Miller's, and the Saranac Lake House, all 3 different hotels that stood here. This in particular is the Saranac Lake House. And I'm going to show you where Mark Twain stayed relative to this. Approximately here. There's a little cabin that is still standing, and actually today it is a maple syrup industry, like place that you can go and get maple syrup. You can rent it out. You can stay there. I actually, while I was studying at SUNY Plattsburgh, was able to sit on the porch and write part of my my thesis on that porch that he would have sat at and wrote at while he was up there. So that's very cool. Then this is the Algonquin. So if you're looking at this photo here, now that you've seen all 3 hotels, the Ampersand is going to be on my right. The Saranac Lake House is going to be on the left. And then behind the Saranac Lake House is going to be the Algonquin, which again is this one. So these are some more intimate photos of the Hotel Ampersand taken by Seneca Ray Stoddard. You can see the dining room, which was considered to be one of the most grand dining rooms in all of the Adirondacks. It was quite expansive. This is just one of the rooms. And then this second photo, first you can see Stoddard loved to put people in his photos, and I love that you get to see what people were wearing while they were staying at the hotel, visiting the hotel. And you can see some of the boardwalks that were installed on the 350-acre campus. This is the parlor room, with mostly empty and then mostly full of people visiting. You can see all sorts of chairs. This is where people would gather. There were multiple parlors in the Ampersand and multiple places for people to get together and really experience this grandness together. One of the considered rare things that the Ampersand offered was sleigh rides on the frozen Lower Saranac, which I think is very cool, and I wish we still did that today. And then, of course, the piazzas. And here, if you look really closely, right here, you You can actually see the Saranac Lake House in the background of this photo. But in the wintertime, these were actually closed off with glass, so people could still sit outside and take in that fresh air, which of course was one of the draws to the Adirondacks, both for people curing, but also for people trying to escape the city life. And these are just some beautiful photos of the outside, where you can see there's boathouses. Again, Stoddard loved to put people in his photos. Most of them were posed, and sometimes he even used himself. But this is a great segue into the architecture of the Hotel Ampersand. So this is from across the lake, sort of where the Millers Martins Saranac Lake House would be. So the Hotel Ampersand was done in a late Victorian Queen Anne style. There were 5 stories to this hotel, and it could fit up to 300 guests. It was known for its tall brick chimneys and its steep gambrel roof. And then, according to the Plattsburgh Republican, the red towers made it look like a garnet in an emerald setting, so a garnet set back into the woods when the sun would hit it just right. And it was often called one of the most fashionable, luxurious, and architecturally significant resort hotels. And a lot of this information about the architectural style you can find in a wonderful book called The Resort Hotels of the Adirondacks, and that was written by Bryant Tallies Jr. So one of my favorite parts of the hotel are these stairs that it's really the first thing that you see that welcomes you to the hotel. And of course this photo has a little bit of damage to it, but it's still one of my favorites. And here's a little bit of a clearer photo of this beautiful staircase. You can see where the carriage would drop you off. And then you would be greeted, of course, by more people on the piazza or someone welcoming you on the stairs. And then you'd get to go into this grand hotel with just so very much to offer. And then this next photo was actually a gift from a friend, and it came from a scrapbook of a traveling band, for lack of a better word, and they took a photo on the steps of the hotel with their cute little straw hats, and they had taken a boat, several boats, from the Glens Falls area up into the Adirondacks, and they played music on these boats for people visiting the area. Okay, and then the piazzas again. So tuberculosis was obviously an issue in the 1880s, and many of the hotels didn't actually allow anybody suffering from consumption to go to the hotels, but it was, sometimes they would look the other way if you weren't too sick or if you had enough money, and it became normal for people to just enjoy sitting outside, breathing in the fresh air, and the fresh mountain air was considered a cure for tuberculosis. A cure, I'll put that in quotations. And so lots of people went to the Adirondacks to cure, a lot of people went out west, and even to the Samoan Islands, which in Robert Louis Stevenson's case was where he went after here to continue to cure. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the expansion. So this is the original hotel from 1888 to 1891. And then in the winter of 1891 into the spring, there was an expansion done to the east and west wings of the hotel. So if you pay attention, let me just get my little laser pointer up. If you pay attention to this chimney right here, we'll go to the next photo. And that chimney shows the expansion. This chimney was right here. So you can see how much was added on to this. This is the west side. And this expansion cost about $35,000. And it was done by a Mead and Taft company from Cornwall. And it added many resources to the hotel. They were able to add lots of new amenities to offer people coming to visit the Adirondacks. And that's what we are going to talk about next. So this is a page from a brochure titled Recreation at Ampersand. and it includes bathing and swimming, fishing, boating, trap and skeet shooting, bridle paths, tennis, shuffleboard, mountain climbing, and water trips. Mallory had mentioned that I sort of forced her and Jody to come explore the woods with me so I could show them some of the things that I found about the Hotel Ampersand. One of those things was a shuffleboard court, fully intact and buried under approximately 3 to 4 inches of moss. So one day, very carefully, my mother and I went down and we rolled off the moss. And sure enough, underneath you could still see remnants of paint marks that showed the shuffleboard like score area, and there were little metal stands in the side of the board to keep the pucks from falling off, and it was all still there. There were lights and insulators in the trees surrounding it, and a little rock path that led the way right to the shuffleboard court. So it's very cool that that is still standing today. This is one of my favorite things that I have found. Oh, I should also note, almost everything pictured here is a part of my personal collection of things that I've gathered in researching the hotel. And most of it should be available scanned through Historic Saranac Lake shortly. If anybody's interested in seeing it. Actually, this receipt is upstairs in the exhibit, so if anybody on the internet or anybody here gets the chance to come see the Mark Twain house, there is an exhibit up until December with some of the Ampersand objects up there. This is a receipt from July 28th, 1898, and it includes 1 week, which would be for the boat rental, and we have the launch fees, the livery fees, laundry fees, and a boat. And you can see that it has a nice big stamp on it that says that it was paid, and that's just some of the things that were offered at the Ampersand. So they had a livery very close by that offered any kind of boating and water sport needs, laundry services, hunting, guiding services, and of course there's that dining room again that offered wonderful views of Lower Saranac and the Ampersand Mountain off in the distance that the hotel was supposedly named after. And then this definitely didn't get eaten by a mouse, but it was a postcard that depicts part of the golf club, and you can actually see people enjoying golf. And you can see the clothes that they were wearing. Women were still wearing skirts, and the men all looked dapper in their vests and button-up shirts. And so this actually was on the other side of the lake, down by where the Saranac Lake House, Millers and Martins was as well. So this picture I added in specifically for Jody and Mallory, but during my research, it was thought that this wonderfully dapper man in the white suit was Mark Twain. It's not. It was very clear after talking with Jody that this was not Mark Twain, but just a gentleman that resembles him and his notorious white suit. But this is the golf house of the Hotel Ampersand, and it is still standing today. And it's actually, there's a funny story. We have a local historian, Maitland de Sormo, who wrote many books on the Adirondacks, and he was a golf caddy at the golf course, which stayed open until World War II-ish, and he bought the house. He lived in it for a very long time, and his family still lives there, so he had that from a childhood all the way through till he died. He was associated with the Ampersand in that way. So there were many tennis courts on the campus of the Hotel Ampersand. This is one of them near the golf grounds. And then get ready for some tennis courts because we're going to look at them. This one, you can see right by the entranceway, there's a nice little flattened out tennis court, and here's that from a different angle here. There were also baseball fields specifically made for the hotel. And then one of my favorite things You can't see it too well in this picture, but there is a toboggan run. Let me get the little laser out again. Right here. And then these kids right here have a little wooden sled that they're using to go down the toboggan onto Lower Saranac. And then this one, this picture again, to really show that toboggan. And then again, one of the reasons why I love when people would take photos of things and include people in them is you can really see people enjoying things that we might take for granted, like a wonderful hill to slide down on and have fun with your friends. So this is a bunch of children going down onto Lower Saranac as well. So then this expansion that built on mostly to the west wing created a reading room, a ladies' writing and card room, a smoking and billiards room, a playroom, a barbershop, a post office, a guide room, or like an office for the Adirondack guides to work out of, a general store, a men's only exercise room, and this also updated the hotel to be full of steam, heat, and gas. The 350 acres included boardwalks, benches, hiking trails, like I said before, golf courses and baseball fields, obviously places to fish and swim and boat. They would hunt with guides, and one of the things that I focused on in my research was how guides hunted with people with money, and they would do a lot of things like they would catch a deer and hold it on a rope, and then the rich men would go out with their guns and shoot the deer, and that was their hunting experience. So, that was hunting, I'll keep putting it in quotes. They could camp. The hotel hosted many concerts and dances. They even had their own orchestral performances, and it was things like that and the post office that Mark Twain actually utilized a bit. All of his letters while he was in Saranac Lake were sent out through, most of his letters were sent out through the Hotel Ampersand post office. And in my paper that I wrote, it was a piece of historical fiction about the classes, the difference between people who lived in the Adirondacks and people who visited the Adirondacks. Mark Twain actually came into the story because you can't not talk about Mark Twain, right? And he was at one of the orchestral performances in that notorious white suit that he had. And he was, anyway, it was a fun story. I'd love to tell anybody about it if they'd like to hear. The hotel also actually had its own farm on the grounds. So you saw that beautiful dining room, both on the postcard and in the photo. And they had real farm-to-table dinners with almost anything that you could get in the city. So all these big, lavish, fancy meals, but also they had local meals like venison and local trouts and things available to eat. They also offered rare winter activities, and I have seen this in several different historical records. Tobogganing, snowshoeing, and then those carriage rides on the lake were all considered rare things for hotels in the area to offer. And then, of course, they had the cabins and tent platforms. And I will tell you guys a little bit more about the cabins in a moment. But first, we must talk about the catastrophe. The fire of 1907, 116 years ago, this Saturday. The hotel burnt down, September 23rd, 1907. And this is also the point in the presentation that I am going to talk about another photographer, and that is William F. Colliker. And now he was a city boy who came up to the Adirondacks, and he started his own local business, it was Colliker Kodak and Gift Shop, and it was on Broadway in Saranac Lake. And he would go and take photos of everything Adirondacks, and he was also very well known. In this instance, he was able to photograph the destruction of the hotel. So, like many hotels and buildings in the Adirondacks, the hotel was completely destroyed by fire. Unfortunately, or fortunately for the owners, fires were hard to prove how they started. They couldn't prove it was arson, so insurance money was almost always guaranteed. And 1906 happened to have been a rough year for the Hotel Ampersand. There's actually a story that the owners at the time went down to the city and they found some men willing to commit arson, paid them, and the men tried to run away with the money because they were paid up front. It didn't go well, and then ended up setting the fire. And there was quite a bit of court time for this case, and it wasn't settled until 1914, so 7 years later, in favor of the hotel. So the owners did get $100,000 for their mishap. Supposedly, another story is that the fire started with a cigar in the elevator, which, we know it was the arson, but how they started it is still a little bit of a mystery. But there are several photos, so this is the last photo of the fire. All very devastating. You can see it was a total loss. After the fire, there were many, many instances of trying to reopen a hotel or a club or other businesses on the site. It didn't go super well. So afterwards, the cabins that were there and the tent stands did remain open well into the 1960s. And this is where we are going to get to my connection. One day, so I have dogs and I live in the woods, and one day one of my dogs got loose. We'll do this first. Okay, so I'll show you the cabins and then I'll tell you about my dog. So this is a map of the cabins, and this shows just how many of them there were and where on Lower Saranac it was. So this is Lower Saranac. This is the boot, and that's the bay, Ampersand Bay, where the hotel sat. And so I'm going to show you the next few slides are photos in postcard form from the 19-teens to the 1960s, and we'll take a look at one of them was written on, and actually a lot of them were written on, but one of them's fun. So this is what it looks like today. There is a hotel there today. It is called the Ampersand Bay Resort Hotel. And it's right about where the hotel stood before. Actually, where you see the Saranac Islands campground, that's pretty much where the main hotel was. And there's a road, the road that looks like it ends right here. It does continue through the woods, and that is a right-of-way to where I live. And this area is where a lot of the things that we've found are. And then there's some things over here that I'm going to tell you guys about in a little bit. But if you go and you can kind of see the map so you can put into perspective where the cabins sat versus what the land looks like today. So let's look at some of these cabins because they're amazingly beautiful. This is Wigwam. And so this one actually sits right on the water, but you can see the elaborate porches. Of course, it's made entirely of wood because we've learned nothing in all of our years living in the Adirondacks, that wood houses burn all the way to the ground. This says, "This is our cottage in the midst of pine and birch trees." And this one didn't have a name associated with it. It just says, "The Cabin, Hotel Ampersand, Lower Saranac." So then you can see here, this says Hotel Ampersand and Cottages, Saranac Lake, New York. But if you take a look right here, you'll see it says Ampersand, made out of birch trees, which is very on point for the Adirondacks. Many of the great camps, many of the lesser camps have big archways, big gates that say Pinehurst, or Sagamore, or Ampersand. And the Ampersand actually had two of them, one on the water so everybody could see it from the water, and one off the Forest Home Road, which is the main road that it was on. And then this is that from a different angle. I'm gonna say, pay attention to those, the stone foundation back there that might look familiar to Jody and Mallory. So again, just another angle, but you can see the walkways, you can see the places that have been put to sit so people can look out over the water and see that hotel, or the mountain, Ampersand. They can see Ampersand Bay. Depending on when, they could see the Saranac Lake House. And okay, so this is called Overlook Cottage. And you can see again, very, very fancy staircase, a closed-in porch. The cottages are pretty close to each other though. If you can see, there's another one in the background. This is just another angle of that same one. I just think these are pretty, so I just wanted to show everybody how, really how beautiful this part of the campus was. Okay, so this one. This postcard was sent in 1932. And something very exciting happened in the area in 1932. So, it's Junior and Wigwam cottages, and then you can see the arrow, it says, "We swam here." How exciting. So it reads, Sunday night, Bobo dear, took drive through mountains today. Yesterday, drove to Lake Placid and saw the ice skating on the arena they used for the Olympics. Love, Marianne. Sent from Saranac Lake, July 18th, 1932. So that was the first time Lake Placid hosted the Winter Olympics. Well, not in July, but the first, 1932 is the first time they hosted the Winter Olympics. So I thought this was a very exciting piece of history because it's not, this has nothing to do with the Olympics, but it was this huge moment in history where these people were able to come to this already historic site and witness something even more historic. All right, and this is Wigwam, again, very popular for the postcards, probably because it's right on the water. But my mom likes to compare these boat-up cabins to the new ski resort style people have these days, where you can ski right up to your cabin. Same thing, but for summertime, you can just boat right up to your cabin, and you don't even have to really hike or do anything to get back home. Okay, so now we're gonna get to my dog. This is Ubu. She was probably only 8 when this happened, but she got loose because she's a little daredevil. She's gonna be 13 in November, and she was running away from me, and I chased her through the woods for a very long time. She was very fast, and we came across something very interesting that actually stopped her in her tracks as well. Oh, goodness. One more. There we go. A gravestone. And this gravestone reads, Laddie. So while she was sniffing, I was able to grab her and get her back in her harness. But then after I brought her home, I went back to see what exactly was going on. So Laddie does not have any dates associated with it. And we don't know much about it other than it's obviously a headstone that somebody paid money for. This is a nice headstone, but it's in the middle of the woods. It's covered with leaves. And so we thought maybe a dog or maybe a young baby that didn't make it. And then behind it is another one. It says Meg, born August 4th, 1897, died September 25th, 1900. She was 3 years old. And this part of the woods was sort of where the people that worked at the hotel lived. So this was someone's daughter that didn't make it, but her parents supposedly maybe worked for the hotel. This was the peak of the Hotel Ampersand. There's not a lot of information out there. I've been trying to dig up some more information, but her birthday just passed, and her death date is 2 days after the fire, actually, the fire date, which is interesting. But this is the setup. You can see they're fairly close to each other. And it was very touching to bring Jody up that way so she could also see them. So these are other photos of things that we found. Remember that stone foundation I told you to kind of keep in the back of your head? This is that. Part of it is still there. This is where that one cottage sat. So this larger picture at the bottom, I'm going to walk around. Hello? Okay. So this larger picture at the bottom is kind of just an extension of that, so you can see it a little bit more clearly. And this is also right next to where the shuffleboard court is and where one of the cabins may still be standing. This land is all owned by the state. So in the 1960s, this land was sold off in parcels. The state bought a huge plot of it, most of which is just to the left over here. You can kind of see there's a walkway right here, and then there's a huge state cabin. And that's that campground that I mentioned earlier. And then another man bought a bunch of it. His name was Frank Cashier. And he sort of portioned it out into little acre, half-acre lots. And in the 1960s, my grandfather bought one of the lots. And the lot that he had came with a small cabin on it. My parents used it, my mom and her family used it as a camp. There were 6 of them, and they probably could have fit 2 people in there comfortably. But they all hung out. It was their space. And then they built a trailer. My mom and my dad built a trailer there. My grandmother and my grandfather lived just in front of them. And then my parents' trailer burned down very randomly one day. And then they rebuilt a home, and now they're still there. I'm still there. And it's been in the family since the 1960s. So our connection started with one of the cabins being on the property, and then us finding these gravestones that really sparked our interest, and then going into the woods and finding things. And that ranges from bottles. I brought one with me today, so everybody here can come up and see it at some point if you want. It is from a bottling company in Saranac Lake. And we actually found several different types of bottles from different bottling companies in Saranac Lake, in Tupper Lake. In the woods, we found, as I sort of mentioned earlier, lights in trees. And I'm not talking like small lights, like lights in trees. The insulators to keep electricity flowing. And then things like walkways. So you can see this. This is the same walkway, just different angles. The lake is right here, and there was a dock that was attached to that at one point. And actually right behind this is a huge paved thing. It's falling apart. It's obviously decades old, if not a part of the original hotel, a part of the cabins. And then all throughout the woods, you'll see rock walls. Could be foundations, could be parts of the farm. Rock walls were very prominent in this time period. And then if you just take a look a little deeper into this image right here, this is a clay pipe. Clay pipes haven't been used in architecture like this in a very, very long time. And then this is that rock-lined trail I was telling you about that leads to the shuffleboard court. Another rock wall in the woods. And then, of course, the sewage we found. This is an older pipe, and this is probably, I keep saying one of my favorite things, but one of my favorite things that we've found in the woods. This is a pile of trash, and I, as an archaeologist, was so happy. And in this pile of trash, we found a dolly that would have had things on it for like a maid's cart, if you will, a refrigerator, a stove, pipes, and a little further away, bed frames. And it was just full of things that were from this time, that were used at the hotel, at the camps. And it's very exciting to me. And I just want to thank everybody who was here for coming and listening to me talk about the hotel, but also I want to thank all of these people and more. Historic Saranac Lake is a wonderful historic society in the Adirondacks. If anybody gets the chance to go there, in the audience or anybody at home that's watching, go support your local historic society because the information they have is amazing. The Saranac Lake Free Library also helped me a lot in my research, of course, SUNY Plattsburgh, and then everybody at the Mark Twain House who welcomed me and allowed me to talk about this hotel tonight with everybody here. So now we're going to do a question and answer. I think Mallory's coming to talk to me. I'll leave this cute picture up, though.
All right, so thank you so much. That was fascinating. Love the pictures. Any questions from our audience, our in-person audience first? And I will repeat the question, so don't worry at home. Yes? So the question was, could you explain je crois?
Let's look at it.
So she mentions that it was part of the shuffleboard. So we're going to take a look.
But it just says something else.
Okay, I'm going to pull it up and we can look at it together, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay. This slideshow is very large, so it takes a minute to load, so I apologize. Yeah, we're right here. Okay, shuffleboard.
Yeah, let's see. That might be a little easier. Let's kill it.
Let's see. I'm going to stand right in front of it so nobody else can see. Sorry. Shuffleboard. Je crois is another popular diversion at the hotel. I have no idea. It's right here, though, for anybody watching at home.
Very curious as to what it was because I never heard of it.
I have also never heard of it. We can probably give it a quick Google and figure it out, though.
Yeah, maybe Jody from behind the scenes can Google it and let us know.
I'll leave it up, Jody, so you can spell it. I can hear her laughing back.
Any other questions from our audience, in-person audience? Questions? All right, well, I have a question, and then if Jody has any from the virtual audience, we will take your questions as well. So my question is talking a little bit about class. Is there a certain class of people that most of the time stayed at Ampersand in the cabins?
Yes, so initially it was definitely a winter resort meant for people to come experience the Adirondacks. So it was, this was considered part of the heyday of the Adirondacks. So bringing the wealthy upper class to the Adirondacks to spend their money. So the people that worked at the Ampersand were definitely average, everyday, hardworking, living the American dream, people. And then the people visiting were the people who had money to visit, that could leave their jobs, did not necessarily have to be at work every hour of every day to be able to afford to come up here. We're not up here, but up there. It was, so my project was called The Clash of Classes. And it was about how the rich and famous, because obviously, I mean, Mark Twain was there, Robert Louis Stevenson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, many, many famous people came to visit Saranac Lake and the Hotel Ampersand. They were vacationing. It was the beginning of what the Mainers call vacation land. That started in the Adirondacks. Camping started in the Adirondacks. Camping was not really, but like the recreation of camping started there. And so it became a pastime for rich people. And then very slowly, the rich people were like, ooh. Ooh, we have to go shoot a deer. But their version of their version of fishing was someone catching a fish and handing the rod. So like how you would teach a child to fish. Or, so these people who worked at the hotel they learned how to tie a fishing knot. They learned how to make fishing poles, make bows, make arrows, and make guide boats. That's the big thing in the Adirondacks, right? Guide boats. These beautifully made wooden boats. And they just the rich people got to enjoy the fruits of everybody else's labor, which I feel like is a theme.
I mean, I wouldn't mind someone catching a fish for me and me taking the credit. That sounds like a fun time.
Jody, do you have an answer?
Testing. I need to know how to spell it to get that answer, but I do have a question.
Oh, okay.
No, go ahead and tell me.
SHU
Okay.
dash
Oh.
QUOI.
Okay. And the question is more for Mallory.
Oh, good.
But what did Mark Twain write any stories in Saranac Lake?
Yes. Oh,
Did you want to talk about it?
no, you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, one of the ones that I know that he wrote there was a double-barrel detective story because I love that. But there was another one. There were like 4 or 5
Yeah, he
short
also worked
stories.
on United States of Linterdom, if anyone's heard of that. He worked on that at Saranac Lake. And that's a big reason, too, he decided to stay not at the hotel, is because he wanted to be able to be left alone to try to get some of this work done. So that's why Gene and Clara, we know, would take the boat over and maybe play some tennis or collect the mail and things of that nature, but they were really separate from the main part of the hotel. And that was kind of another question I had, is that was there any rhyme or reason to pick the cabins versus the hotel? And did a lot of the more famous, well-known people besides Twain choose to do that? Or did they stay in the main part of the hotel?
I feel like most people that were I feel like the hotel was where it was at. That was where the party was. That was where, the dances were held. The food was. I feel like that was the place that if I were rich and famous, I wouldn't want to hike over to a cabin. I don't have that picture. I'm going to put up another picture. Sorry, one second. The hotel, even now, the woods is thick. It's not fun to walk through. I love it, but it's not fun to walk through. Mallory knows.
I know, firsthand.
So it wasn't necessarily the most pleasant thing to be at a party over here and then to have to trudge back through the woods at your cabin. So it really, I feel like, depends on what your purpose was. If you were there to write, to just breathe in the outside, or to camp, if you were there to camp, if you wanted to enjoy the outdoors, the cabins were definitely where it was at. Or, post 1907, you didn't really have a choice.
Okay, so it really depends on intention. If you want to get a break from people and find solace and peace, cabins would be the way to go, with still the amenities of the hotel if need be. And then if you really wanted to be where things were happening, you'd probably stay at the hotel.
Right, yeah.
That makes complete sense.
Jody, back to you.
Hello? Okay, it's on. So Diane R. got the answer even quicker than I did.
Yay, Diane.
So it is a horseshoe-like game, and the Chouquois Corporation made them, so it was branding.
Oh, branding. Nice. Free advertisement.
Okay, mystery solved. Thank you. Are there any virtual questions? Okay, any other questions from our audience? Okay, I have one more.
Okay.
So you talked about tuberculosis and how they would sit out to get the fresh air.
Yes.
And we know that Dr. Trudeau was a big part of Saranac Lake. Was there any connection between him and the hotel? Did he make like hotel calls or vice versa? Do we know anything about that?
So one thing I didn't mention, a lot of the hotels didn't want you there if you were sick.
Well, it makes sense.
So they also didn't want you there if you were Jewish. It was that time. There were lots of, in the pamphlets, it was like, if you are suffering from consumption, we don't want you here. Also, if you're Jewish. So it kind of clumped people together as outsiders, what my project also spoke on the outsiders being, because they were still, obviously, there were Jewish people everywhere. There were people suffering from tuberculosis everywhere during this time. Yeah, he wouldn't have, I don't believe. Chessie is going to be here in a month, and I'm sure she's probably yelling at me through a screen right now. But I don't believe that he personally would have. I'm sure there were doctors that made calls if somebody became ill at the hotel. But for the most part, if you had consumption, you were blacklisted, for lack of a better word.
Got it. All right, we do have a question from our virtual audience.
Okay. It always takes a minute for it to turn back on. So, Ellen asks, did winter recreation come at the same time as summer? Like, were they simultaneous, or did one start first?
That's a really great question. In 1888, the hotel was actually built for winter recreation. So the hotel was open in the winter initially, but then after the heyday, after the 1890s, after the expansion, early 1900s, the hotel actually closed down in the wintertime. So supposedly during the fire, the hotel had been just closed down. And so some of the stuff from the hotel, because people have things from the hotel. The library has a beautiful desk thing from the hotel. Other people have things from the Ampersand. Because it was brought out of the hotel pre-fire, because it was closed for the winter. So they brought things out that could be used, because the people who worked there still lived there. The cabins were maybe still operating, people were still around. There was a post office, whatever. But the hotel itself was closed when it burned.
And so that's another question I have for the staffing. Most of the staff then would be local. Do we know how they would know?
Oh gosh, my favorite thing about people
good.
work. No, I love this. So one of the things that I found was back in the day, newspapers were a thing. No, in the newspaper, they would tell people Mallory's working at the hotel this year. So it would say like the Malone Times, right? It would be like, Jacob is going all the way to Saranac Lake for the summer. He's going to work at the Hotel Ampersand. Go, Jacob.
Wow.
Yeah, so you would find these clips of, like, not job postings, but people being like, I have a job, and I'm going somewhere. And it was exciting for people to be able to work in a place like that, or at least it looked like people were excited about it.
Wow, it's a little announcement.
Yeah, it was cute.
That's very interesting. Any other questions, virtually or in person, before we... No, it looks like you can go right ahead.
I just want to let the virtual people know there's 6 people sitting in front of me.
Yeah, so if anybody in the virtual audience lives in Connecticut,
Come
we
in.
encourage you to come in for the next one in person. But we understand we like to reach, we have people from Florida here in the virtual audience, and your mom's in the audience.
Hi, Mom.
Virtually, and
Thanks.
a whole bunch of other people, so that's great. But the next question is from John. He says, from the mid-19th century, many places had interesting speakers. Is there a record of speakers at the Ampersand?
So in my research is how I'm going to start this. I did not see a list of speakers. The interesting things that I did see, there were orchestras that would come up and play specifically, like the orchestra was specifically created for the Ampersand. So there would be bands that would play specifically for the Ampersand. As far as speakers go, that I don't know the answer to that. Sorry. Thank you, though. That was a great question. I'll look into it.
All right. Yes, question.
Well, so he technically wasn't staying at the hotel. Whoa, what? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm repeating the question. What brought Samuel Clemens and his family to the hotel? I knew I was going to do that, too. She told me. So it wasn't technically the hotel. It was close to the hotel, and the hotel was the closest post office. It was the closest general store. It was a paddle away, which is very nice for people. And the bay itself is not very large, so it's like a quick 10-minute paddle maybe to the other side. So where he was, and it's quite beautiful. It would have been right next to the golf course, so it may have been considered a part of the campus, but it wasn't an official cabin of the Hotel Ampersand. So what brought him to Saranac Lake, I will throw to Mallory.
So yeah, this was becoming a really popular thing to do at the time, and actually some of his friends, including Charles Dudley Warner would spend a lot of time in the Adirondacks. So when they were looking for places to sort of escape so he could take a break, maybe work on some writing and things like that, this is a place that was offered that they were able to find and work out to stay there. So that's what brought him there. And he was secluded enough where he wanted to be left alone. I think he even got harassed by a reporter who kept trying to row over to the cabin and interview him, and he finally gave in, I think, and answered some questions. But it's a really idyllic place, and the cabin is still around.
Yeah, and it's actually, it is really nice. Jack Drury owns it. Sorry, Jack, I name dropped you. And he has a maple facility, and he's just the sweetest. He let me go over there, and I got to kind of see what the cabin looks like. He's got all sorts of Mark Twain books and Adirondack information for people who do stay there. And, you know, I got to sit on the porch where Mark Twain sat. But I will say, because I did get this question from people back home, there's not a whole lot known about what Mark was doing. Sammy boy, what he was doing while he was up there. He was very private. There were other people who were there who were very, like, write in my diary so everybody knows exactly what I was doing. Robert Louis Stevenson was everywhere. He was staying in the middle of town. If you're in Saranac Lake and don't know, it's over by Moody Pond. There's a museum there. You know, he was, I don't want to say active in the community, but he was more active in the community than Mark Twain was. And he is out of the way. Like, if you go there today, you have to go down a road, around a very large corner, and suddenly you're just surrounded by woods. I mean, you guys went there, right? And then at the very end of the road is a cabin set back into the trees. So it is, even today, very secluded. I mean, the Adirondacks are still very wild.
He definitely didn't socialize while he was there, for the most part.
The kids did, though.
Yeah, Gene and Clara would have been more active with going to the hotel and playing tennis and things like that. We know that he hired a guide, Frank Davis.
Yep.
We don't know too much about him, unfortunately.
Nope.
But we know that he went out in a guide boat, was shown around, things like that, but for the most part kind of kept secluded.
Yeah.
Yes, question.
Rent his cabin? Is that in my memory?
Yes, yep. You could. I don't know. Oh, I'm so sorry. The question was, can you rent the Mark Twain cabin? I do believe Jack is still renting the cabin out. And I mean, his little maple shack is there, so even if it's rented out, you can go and Jack's probably there and you can talk to him. And
It's delicious maple syrup.
It is really good maple syrup.
Any last questions? All right.
All right, last one from the virtual audience. And Mallory and I also got to stay in the cabin, and it was lovely. So if you do go up there and can rent it, I'd recommend it. But the last question from the virtual audience is, how did people get to the hotel, and where were most of the patrons from?
Oh, I love this. Okay. So, things I just didn't want to overwhelm people with in my presentation. The main access to the Adirondacks in the 1880s were trains. We were talking about trains before, yes. So people came from New York City on a train that went all the way to Blue Mountain Lake, which seems a little excessive if you know where Blue Mountain Lake is relative to Saranac Lake. And then either a carriage or another smaller train into Saranac Lake. There is a train station in Saranac Lake. Unfortunately, the track has been removed, but that's a whole other story.
Mm-hmm.
So there were trains right in, and actually the old station used to have these cute little signs that would say Algonquin, Ampersand, and the stagecoaches would line up. I wasn't going to say this, but one of the guys who was the stagecoach driver for the Hotel Ampersand was a very distant relative of mine.
Oh, very cool.
Yes. I won't say his name, it's fine. But there's a wonderful picture of him in this beautiful stagecoach, and behind it is a sign that says Hotel Ampersand, and what's that guy's name that has that site? Okay, well, there's a picture online of the Ampersand sign, and it was in the museum at the old train station in Saranac Lake. Where it ended up now, I have no idea, because the train station's not really a thing anymore. But that was how people would get to and from the hotel, stagecoach, train.
And where, do we know where they were coming from for the most
yes,
part?
sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Most of the visitors were coming from the big city. So a lot of New York people, a lot of Boston people, there was a train line that came from Canada. So there would be some out-of-towners for sure,
So
out-of-countryers.
really escaping the hot
city
big
life.
cities
Yeah.
to get away. Makes complete sense.
It was considered, the owners of the Hotel Ampersand considered the Ampersand itself the Saratoga of Lower Saranac. So if you know anything about Saratoga, New York, it was a pretty busy little place, and it was like the racetrack is there for anybody that doesn't know, and I mean, historically speaking, it was a very big central location for New York State. So they thought pretty highly of themselves, and for good reason.
That's what to say. They should be proud.
Yeah, very proud. Very
Beautiful pictures, beautiful hotel.
proud.
So,
Did you have a question?
any other questions?
Okay, later. Yeah.
How about what animals have you seen recently? That kind of reflects on that kind of the things you've seen.
Yeah. So the question was, what kind of animals do we see in my backyard? Well, I was just talking about this to everybody, well, to a few people that were here. I have another dog, not pictured. Her name is Whoopsie Daisy, and Mallory and Jody got to meet her. She likes to bark at things.
Yes.
But she's a 90-pound baby, and she recently has been going crazy. And so we put a trail cam out to see what we might catch. And outside we've seen coyotes and bobcats and fox and bear, and our neighbor saw a moose. And actually, if you look in the archives of the Adirondack Daily Enterprise, there were two very large moose that swam from where the Ampersand was to the other side where Mark Twain was, where the Saranac Lake House was, where the golf course was. And so we just live in this area that is just full of animals. And don't get me started on the birds. We have so many amazing animals that just live with us. The deer, there are too many. There's too many deer. But we do get to experience a lot of wildlife that I feel like some people back then, probably even too, would take for granted. So, very exciting.
We know that Mark Twain wrote about the squirrels that were visiting him. So I highly encourage, if you have not come to visit the exhibit yet, to come visit us. And you can learn more about Saranac Lake and about the rest of the destinations that Clemens has spent some of their summers. But I want to thank Michaela so much for coming all this way and doing this fantastic presentation. So give her a round of applause, and everyone have a fantastic night. Thank you.